I want to chat today a little bit about fear responses and how they impact me as a person with complex PTSD and how that's impacted me since I launched this project I'm doing. So, humans, we have this response to fear: fight, flight, freeze, or fawning. And um, those are designed to help us uh, figure out how to survive when we are faced with fear. With PTSD, oftentimes you'll have that kind of response when there's no actual threat, like something will trigger that for you, and um, it doesn't match the situation. So, how this looks for me, or how it has looked for me, is that when I launched this project and I recorded a video a week or so ago, a week and a half ago, about how much tension I had been holding in my body to put myself out there. I feel like since then I had like a really big vulnerability hangover, and I was really stuck in a freeze state without realizing it. And so what that looked like for me is like when I would get up in the morning or when I would come home from work, I would turn the TV on right away or an audiobook, and just so I didn't have to hear my own thoughts, basically distracting myself, right? And distraction can be a really healthy way of coping with uncomfortable feelings or situations. But when it's stuck on for over a week, then it's problematic. And so that was showing up for me in that way. And I another way it was showing up for me was I was having more migraines than usual. I had really intense insomnia. Um, and I was isolating myself, canceling plans with friends that I really care about and mean a lot to me, because I was having, I mean, I had a migraine, but I also if I'm curious to know if I had kind of pushed myself through that, if I would have felt better after seeing them instead of canceling. And so isolating myself is one thing that I do sometimes when I'm feeling really triggered or overwhelmed. So like my anxiety gets more intense, depression can get more intense for me. Um, so like yeah, so I'd get up, shower, walk my dog, go to work, come home, and then really struggle with sleeping. So anyway, so that's what it was looking like for me. I think kind of being very vulnerable about what I have been through, and then also talking about some of this stuff openly kind of has triggered me. And so the freeze state is kind of where I go to. So when I was married, I would freeze a lot. Sometimes, occasionally, I would fight. I never left until I actually left. Physically left anyway. I feel like I dissociated a lot and would stay in bed with depression for long periods of time. Like I would get up, get my kids off to school, take them to school, come home, get back in my bed, go pick them up, do dinner. And then there were days sometimes when my ex-husband would pick them up and take them because I just couldn't do anything. And after 18 years of my marriage, I realized like I can't keep living like this. I had conversations with him, my ex-husband, about like the behaviors and um, his behavior, how it impacted me, how it impacted our kids, and that I really needed him to stop. And I would think he was taking me seriously. I would think that he was going to do it, and then nothing would change, right? So, um, what his behaviors looked like were, there wasn't a like direct physical abuse to my body in the way normally people think of it. Like, I knew what domestic violence was by somebody getting punched or beaten or choked, those kinds of experiences. I didn't realize that the physical violence that wasn't directed towards my body was considered domestic violence. And I didn't realize until I started therapy and went back to school that these things my ex-husband had been doing my entire marriage, um, I could have called the police on him and he would have had felony charges for, I don't know, dozens, hundreds maybe of uh, things. One thing that sticks out in my mind is I don't remember the circumstance. I don't remember why he was angry. Um, he has a really explosive, violent temper, and if that is triggered, he would throw things, break things, drive recklessly, yell and scream at people, call them names. This happened to me and my kids, his dad, his mom, his brother. I'm sure it happened in the workplace, because he never really could hold a job or things like that. So I also think it was the way he behaved as a child, and it didn't really click for me that the problems he had told me he'd had in childhood were a precursor to his behavior as an adult. So anyway, one of these incidents, I don't remember like how it started, who he was angry at, but in the backyard of the home we lived at, he was very angry, and so he threw paint cans around, and so there was blue paint splattered all over the trees, the driveway, the porch, like just all over the place. And also at the same time, in that same man baby temper tantrum, he I don't remember what he used to do this with, but he broke the windshield out of a truck he had. He like shattered it, smashed it, right? And so I that's an example of his behavior. And so I think early on in my marriage to him, I became desensitized to these violent outbursts that he had. And mm, uh, I think at the beginning, some of my memories are fuzzy around this, and some of them I think there are things I don't remember, but I feel like I was afraid of it, and I was afraid of him. And I had this idea. I don't know how it started or when it started, but I had this idea that I was responsible for his behavior. And I think that is something that was ingrained to me as a girl and a young woman in the church, with all of these messages I had been receiving about like, um, how I dressed affected men and boys. And I mean, I even Dallin H. Oaks there's a quote of him in general conference telling girls and women that if you are dressing provocatively, which doesn't mean what it means for the rest of the world. What it would mean for a Mormon girl is if your shorts were too short, or your shoulders were showing, or your belly was showing, or you wore a bikini, right? Like that you were basically pornography, and getting in the way of men and boys being able to control their urges and their thoughts and their temptations, right? And so from a very young age, I feel like I was indoctrinated this way that men and boys, like I was responsible for their actions and their feelings. And I feel like he was too. And so that's a way patriarchy affects men and boys in the church too. And I have a lot to say about that too, because I don't think that is ideal either. But he also would use that against me, right? So like when he would have these violent outbursts, it was something I said or did, or something the kids said or did, or his dad, somebody said or did um, to provoke these responses in him, for him to like completely lose his shit and freak the fuck out, right? And because he's bigger and stronger than me and our kids. I mean, it could be really scary, but I became desensitized to this. And I think that that's where my freeze response came into play because um, another example of this is Memorial Day in 2013, I believe. I had been in therapy for a while. We were doing couples counseling. Uh, a tradition that I had in my family as a child is that on Memorial Day, we would take flowers to the cemetery to honor and remember our ancestors. And my ex-husband thought that was kind of stupid. He thought it was a waste of time. And um, so I never did that when I was married to him. And I had been doing a little therapy. I was trying to reclaim myself a bit. And so I told him that I wanted to do this. And he said he would go with me and the kids could go with us. And I think the day before that, or a couple of days before that, I don't remember exactly when, but it was really close. He and I had been we were driving down to Provo to visit one of our kids. And we had a Suburban, and he was driving. And I don't recall what we were arguing about. But I was feeling really uncomfortable and really upset. And I told him I wanted to get out of the car, thinking he would take like an exit or pull over safely somewhere. Because I was feeling really overwhelmed and I needed a break, right? And so we're driving down I-15, 65, 70 miles an hour. I don't know. I'm in the passenger seat, so I'm not focused like I am when I'm driving and like noticing what's behind me, what's to the side of me, all the things you do when you're driving, right? And so, I, told him a couple of more times that I wanted to get out of the car, and suddenly he just slammed on the brakes so hard that the seatbelt locked on me, right? And I was held there and just swerved over like 3 lanes to the shoulder. And I mean, I was terrified, right? Because I had no idea what was behind it. Terrified, like what was happening. Because I mean, we could have hit somebody could have hit us, whatever. So we're over to the side. He gets out of the car, slams the door shut, and storms off down this exit that's right there and just walks away from me, right? And so I'd been in therapy and I um was like, I just am not going to put up with this anymore. His reckless driving, uh, so many occurrences of that, with just him and I, and also with our kids in the car. I mean, it's very scary when you're in a car and somebody else has control of it and they're having a tantrum and driving recklessly. And I had it. I mean, we've been in couples counseling. So I scooted over to the driver's seat and continued the trip to Provo without him. After, I don't know, 10 minutes maybe, he called and asked where I had gone. And I said, I'm going to Provo. I don't think it's a good idea we go together. Why don't you call your mom or dad to see if they can pick you up? And we can, I don't know, try to talk when I get home. So I found out sometime later that, I don't know, a couple of years later, that he had actually called one of our other kids to come and get him. And so kind of put our kid in the middle of this. And I'm not sure what was said to this kid, but I was very upset about that he had put one of our kids in the middle of that when I found out. So anyway, Memorial Day comes the next day or a couple days later, and the kids and I are out in the car waiting for him. And he comes out, and I'm in the driver's seat. He tells me to move. He's going to drive. And I said, no, I think I'll drive. I don't feel good about this, because of what happened the other day. And so he started fighting with me about that. Like it became this power struggle that he was going to drive us to the cemetery. So then he got angry and just said to go without him. So we left. We went and did our thing. We came back. He was still angry. And so this is how desensitized I was. So at this time, when this happened, I'd been in therapy. I had been back to school taking intro to social work classes. I had to finish my bachelor's degree. Um, and I knew then that, when he had these violent outbursts, that I could call for help, and that even though he wasn't hurting my body or the body of my kids, that he could be arrested for these violent outbursts in front of the kids and in front of me. Because what that is it's intimidation, right? It's like showing his strength and his anger. Stronger than us, bigger than us, much more angrier than us. And these acts of violence are intimidating, right? They make you afraid and they make you feel like you are helpless in this situation, and or you might get hurt, right? So we're sitting in our bedroom trying to talk through what had happened. I'm sitting on the bed, and the kids are in the house, and um, he grabs this wooden baseball bat that he had. And for a moment, I thought, oh my gosh, is he going to hit me with this? What is he going to do? And then he starts hitting the floor with it. And he repeatedly hit the floor over and over and over until this baseball bat was busted into smithereens, like slivers of wood, like all over the bedroom. And then he gets up, or he was already standing. He left, went outside, slammed the back door. So then, the kids come in to see what's happened. Um, Everybody's upset. I'm thinking, okay, I know I can call the police. I should call the police, right? And then one of my kids comes in and tries to start cleaning it up, and I was like, no, we're not gonna clean up this. That's your dad's responsibility to clean up this mess he made. We're not going to do that for him. And so we left the room. I'm going back and forth, like, should I call? I should call. I'm scared to call, this whole thing. And I had just sat there on my bed the whole time he had been busting up this baseball bat, right? Like, very desensitized and frozen. Okay. And so I ended up not calling the police because I think I was afraid of them not believing me when they came, and afraid of him not having any consequences. I was already in this position where, through our therapy so far, and through our counseling with church leaders, only one of these guys and my parents were the only ones that believed me about what he was doing. Everyone else was kind of buying into his storyline about what was happening, and that I was crazy, and that I was making these things up, and that I um had a really bad mental health, which I did, but not in the way that he was saying I did, right? And so I didn't call the cops, which I regretted many times through the years of post separation abuse and the custody uh, entanglements, because he was given, almost 50-50 custody when he was not the primary caregiver. He didn't even know who the kids' teachers were. He wasn't sure what time they had to be to school. He didn't know who their friends were. I mean, right? So, anyway, that's a discussion for another time about post separation abuse. But anyway, I didn't call, right? And so that's an example of how freeze happens. And so I feel like sometimes when my PTSD is triggered, most often when my PTSD is triggered, I go into this freeze state where I just kind of withdraw into my little shell and make myself small, and have a hard time taking care of myself. I have a lot of somatic symptoms, the headaches, the insomnia. Um, Sometimes I get a lot of stomach distress. So just a lot of things, right? So yeah, so this happened. I was frozen for a while, and I feel like it's really helpful to understand what PTSD can look like and what our responses can look like when we are in scary situations. Not everybody goes right to fight. Not everybody goes to flight. Some people do, but some people don't. And I'm a freezer and a fawner. And fawning is like, oh gosh, like what I would do for fawning with him is I would kind of walk on eggshells and make sure that uh, tried. I mean, I was very hyper vigilant. Like I would make sure that I would try to make sure that the kids were behaving the way he would want them to, that things were being done the way he wanted them to, like loading the dishwasher. If I didn't load the dishwasher the way he wanted me to, he would change it or tell me to change it, things like that. So I would try to do everything the way he wanted it done so he wouldn't have one of these explosive tantrums. Like the street we lived on, like I was so hyper vigilant, I became aware of the sound of his truck, right? He had a diesel pickup truck, and I could hear when it turned down our street. And so when I heard that noise, I would immediately be like, okay, where is everybody? What's everybody doing? And just try to get that all set for him. Like this, I would get mad at the kids if they hadn't done what they needed to or were behaving in a way that would upset him. I would just try to make sure everything was just so, right? And another way the fawning showed up for me is like his odd behaviors in public sometimes, or with his family. Like I would make excuses for him and I would make explanations for him. And I would be like, explain these things away to make them more normal. So he would seem more normal to people and they wouldn't think that what he was doing was odd. An example of this is one time uh, one of his big things was making the kids do a lot of work in the backyard. Not that teaching kids a good ethic is wrong. I agree with that, but he was like child labor, slave labor person. But anyway, his brother's kids were over at our house. They had had a sleepover with my kids, and something. I was in the house. The kids were all outside, under his direction and supervision for the whatever work he was having them do. And one of his brother's kids did something that upset my ex-husband. And this kid was like, so he, like my ex-husband, he was like very hardline, very strict, very no mm, no leeway, no empathy, right? And no, wouldn't hear out of the context of a situation, just very strict and hardline. Like, if you don't do the thing, there's punishment. And so he was very much like that. And so, with his brother's kids being over, one of them did something that set him off. Um, and next thing I know, the kids are all coming in the house, upset. One of, you know, one of these kids that were visiting our home was crying and really upset and wanted to go home because my ex-husband had like really spanked this kid very hard. He believes in corporal punishment, which is legal in the state of Utah, and which I have strong feelings about that too, which is also a topic for another day. But this kid, like I don't know, 7 years old, not very old, and not used to this form of harsh punishment that was being given. And so this kid was understandably upset. And um, so the way Fawning looked in this situation is like when um, his brother and his wife came to pick up their kids because their kid called them and wanted to go home. I was like making excuses for the adult that had behaved inappropriately to a child and abusively to a child. And I tried to, smooth it out, brush it under the rug a little bit, trying to minimize it, like make it seem like it wasn't that big of a deal when it actually really was. And I mean, he did things like that to our kids too. And, part of this trauma response that I had was that, or the way I coped with those things in the moment, because I didn't know what else I could do. Um, the fawning, like, and, kind of telling the kids, victim blaming, right? Like, well, you need to do this and this and this, kind of this idea that he had that the kids needed to be more of an adult than he did, right? It was okay for him to lose his shit and freak the fuck out at them, but they couldn't do normal kid things without him like really getting angry. And so he was really desensitized to that. And I was also like in this relationship with him that little by little at the beginning drew me in a way that it became where I became this person that I wouldn't have normally been, and I backed him up. So I think the reasons I backed him up are because one of the temple covenants that I had made, which was to hearken unto the voice of my husband, which means to obey him basically, as he follows God. And so, yeah, I had been taught that, because he was a returned missionary, he was active in the church, he went to the temple, he did all these things, that he was this worthy, righteous man and that I had to uphold, right? And I think what comes into play here is something called intermittent reinforcement. And that is a behavioral psychology term that is defined in the way of like, so reinforcement is like reinforcing a behavior or a response. And so intermittent means it goes back and forth between negative and positive. And so when you think about the cycle of abuse, there is like a honeymoon phase in a relationship where things are going really well, um, and no problems, you're in love, everything is great. And then there's a build-up phase, a tension building phase, where slowly over time, tension builds, and then there's like an explosive phase where an incident happens. And so there's the positive with the honeymoon phase, and then the negative with the explosive phase. And then there's like a repair piece to that too. And so that type of relationship dynamic really can mess with your mind psychologically. It's a bit of a mind fuck because you think, okay, I know this person can be good. I know they can. We've had these really good things happen and we've had these really good times. And so you kind of keep trying to do what you can do to make the good thing happen again because you know it can happen and you know this person can do it. But where they are this person that doesn't take accountability for their actions and for themselves, they externalize the blame. And so they like put the blame out on to other people around them. Like in my experience in my marriage, it was I was blamed for things, his dad was blamed for things, his brothers, his sister-in-law, employers, friends, church members who weren't behaving the way he thought they should. He would blame his behavior on all of these other things. And then he would, he would apologize and say, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have said that. But there was no real accountability in the way that there was no changed behavior. Um, and so that is a way that narcissists show up in relationships. Narcissistic abuse is abuse that is, oh, what's the word I'm thinking for? It is perpetrated by people who are personality disordered and have narcissistic personality disorder, or antisocial personality disorder, or borderline, or bipolar, or they're very high in narcissistic traits. Narcissism is a human personality trait that we all have and that we all need as children to kind of develop a sense of self. But when somebody is really high on these or disordered, these traits are used to weaponize against people. And so what differentiates narcissistic abuse and other types of abuse, not all abusers are narcissists, but those that are, it's intentional. It's like they are intentionally trying to be manipulative. They're intentionally trying to get you to take on the burden of their behavior or their emotions, really. So it's an intentional, manipulative, gaslighting, crazy making type of thing where they like intentionally push your buttons to provoke a response, or they will um, uh, over time, the longer you're in this type of dynamic with somebody, the more you take on the responsibility for what's happening. And for me, with that came so much shame because intense shame. Like, it's so intense that I didn't even tell like my best friends what was happening in my marriage. Because I believed it was my fault. And I believed that I was in this relationship that was done the correct way so I could get into top tier heaven, which is the celestial kingdom, the highest degree of the celestial kingdom, which I like to call top tier heaven, where you have this temple marriage, you are doing all the things you're supposed to do. And from the outside looking in, we could look like a really picture perfect Mormon family, right? We've got all the kids, we both serve in the church, blah, 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 right? But nobody knew that behind closed doors, I was intensely miserable, and my kids were miserable in a lot of ways. And I was reinforcing his negative behaviors towards them because I was trying to like make this thing that I thought we were in be what it was. And that was where I was projecting my ideals and the way I saw the world onto him and trying to make him be the person he claimed he was, right? And so I got caught up in that too in a really negative way sometimes. Um, which is a really normal thing that can happen in that type of dynamic. I did find out down the road, like, I don't know, maybe it was the summer before I decided to get divorced. It was maybe June. I don't remember when. I'd gone with my friends who were in the Young Women's Presidency with me to BYU's, I don't know, what's that called? I don't know, that women's conference they do in the spring. I don't remember what it's called anymore. We had gone to that, and uh, we had some incidences happen while I was gone between him and the kids and some of their friends. And he had been on the phone with his dad when these things happened. And so I had talked to his dad afterwards to try to get to the bottom of it. Was my ex-husband lying to me, or were my kids lying to me, right? Because I was in this place now where I knew that he did this stuff sometimes, and I was still trying to work it out with him. Um, but I now knew that he was a liar about a lot of things and would twist the truth to make himself look like the victim, right? And so on the phone with his dad, this was also 2013, his dad told me that my ex-husband had bipolar. That's what the family called this mental health thing that was a very genetic thing in their family. My ex-husband had talked a lot about his uncle and his aunt who had allegedly had this bipolar, his cousins, and these criminal behaviors these people had, right? Like cheating on taxes, stealing money from people, um, yeah, a lot of things like that. And it didn't click with me until this conversation that my ex-husband was doing these same behaviors. He was always trying to, uh, always cheated on taxes, uh, and I think he probably did cheat previous employers out of money. I don't have any evidence of this. I don't, um, but just the way those conversations went at the time and how he handled his divorce proceedings with me, I feel like this is a pattern of behavior where he knew ways to get out of paying what he owed to people or taking more than he should have from them. So anyway, so his dad told me that day that he had bipolar and his dad was really proud of me because I'd handled him like a champ for all these years. And I was stunned because I was shocked because at that time, I had been married to him 21 years. And that's the first time anybody in his family had ever said anything to me like this. So I was like stunned and shocked that they had known this about him and had not ever talked to me about it or ever helped me with it. So anyway, that's another piece. I don't know. I can't diagnose him. I don't know what he's ever been diagnosed with. But that's just something I was told. And I just know what behavior he had that I saw throughout my relationship with him and throughout the years following our divorce. So yeah, these are things that, oh gosh, I got way off track. I can't remember where I was going with this. But anyway, I just felt duped. I had felt duped. I had felt betrayed and I felt like I had struggled so long with this man, um, and trying to have like the family I wanted and the life I wanted. And I felt like I had been duped. And I had, yeah, some of that came from me and my idealism and, what I believed religiously, but also a lot of it came from him and this mind fuck of a life that I lived with him. So I will be talking more about narcissistic abuse, intermittent reinforcement, and all these things at another time. Um, I just wanted to this episode just share like how intense this has been for me to do this project that's really important to me and like how it's impacting me. So you know, in case anyone else is in this type of situation or feels some of these things, they might, have a better understanding of it. And thanks for joining me for this episode of Dear Becky B. One of these days, I'm going to get like a little bit more structured, and we're going to hope for the best with that.